If that's your focus, listen to me, you're wrong as a Christian. If that is your focus, you're wrong as a Christian. If you don't want to come to a lock-in on May 5th because you didn't like something that happened at it last time, there wasn't enough fun games or something, but you had 15 friends come, you're wrong as a Christian. You're wrong as a Christian because that shouldn't be your focus. Your focus needs to be, man, I got 8 people to come last time. I need to get those 8 and 5 more because people need to hear about Jesus Christ. Bottom line. Are you guys excited? People need to hear. Listen, people need to hear about Jesus, not about gladiator jousting or jet skis at camp. They need to hear about Jesus. Are you giving it to them? Listen, you can't be focused on yourself and on heaven. You cannot be focused on yourself and on heaven. It doesn't work like that because heaven's not about you. This life isn't about you. It's about telling people about Christ. The third thing I want you to know about heaven is the only hope a person has is in heaven. The only hope a person has is in heaven. Colossians 1:5 says this, because of the hope which is laid up for you in heaven, of which you heard before in the word of the truth of the gospel. Listen again. Because of the hope which is laid up for you in heaven, of which you heard before in the word of the truth of the gospel. Your hope's in heaven. Anybody's hope's in heaven. Everybody's hope is in heaven. Listen, there was a 5-year-old boy who was diagnosed with lung cancer. A 5-year-old boy, this is a true story, diagnosed with lung cancer. His mom took him to the doctor, and the nurse, her name was Gracie Schaefer. She's the one who recorded this story. Gracie was his nurse, and she went in one day, and she was spending time with the boy, and she realized after being diagnosed with lung cancer and checking out his lungs, she realized he wasn't going to last very long. You see, lung cancer is an extreme type of cancer, especially for a young kid. What happens is your lungs begin to fill up with fluid. Makes you feel like you can't breathe anymore, makes you real claustrophobic, especially for a young kid. So this 5-year-old boy has lung cancer. And the lady goes in, she diagnoses his lungs and goes back in and basically tells the mom, you better get ready for the last 6 hours of your son's life. Your son's going to pass away in the next 6 hours. So she goes down to her son's forehead, gives him a kiss on the forehead, rubs his head, gives him a kiss on the cheek, and whispers something in his ear. Just whispers something lightly in his ear. And then she goes outside to start calling family. So an hour goes by, and the mom is out there alerting everyone, trying to get him there for the last couple hours of her son's life. She's telling anybody and everybody. And then finally, the little boy starts looking at the nurse. He's gone blind now. The cancer's caused him to go blind. He starts screaming, Mom, Mom, I hear the bells. Mom, I hear the bells ringing. Mom, I hear the bells ringing. So the nurse kind of leaves the office or the hospital room thinking, okay, that was kind of different, and begins to head down the hallway and runs into the mom in the hallway. Stops the mom and says, hey, I don't know what was going on with your son, but he was kind of hallucinating inside the hospital room. I think it was from the drugs that we gave him. He kept saying, Mom, I hear the bells ringing. Mom, I hear the bells ringing. And she looked at the nurse and said, you got to be kidding me. And she said, come with me. She grabbed a hold of the nurse, drug her right back to the hospital room, went inside there and looked at her son, gave him a kiss on the forehead. 45 minutes later, her son died. 45 minutes later, her son died, and she looked at the nurse. And the nurse said to her, what was the big deal with the bells ringing? She said, I whispered to my son before I left the room. Listen now, I whispered to my son before I left the room, if you begin to feel sick, if you begin to get short of breath, if you begin to get lonely, listen closely, son. You'll hear heaven's bells ringing. She said, listen real closely. You'll hear heaven's bells ringing. Listen, what was the little boy's only hope? In his last dying moments, his hope was in heaven. Whether or not he heard bells, that's beside the story. Listen, what he was relying on was knowing that there was a heaven that he was going to. What he was relying on was knowing that he was on his way to heaven. Heaven is our only hope. It's our only hope because, listen, this life means nothing. And it's going to get harder, I promise you. It's going to get harder. Some of you are going through parents getting a divorce. Some of you are going through having to move to another school. Some of you are going through friends turning their backs on you. Whatever it is, listen, it's only going to get harder, and our only hope as a Christian is heaven. It's heaven. What's the fourth thing I want you to know about heaven? Heaven is a prepared place for a prepared people. Listen up. Heaven is a prepared place for a prepared people. Revelation 22:14 says, "Blessed are those who do his commandments, that they may have the right to the tree of life and may enter through the gates in the city." Talking about heaven. And listen, heaven's not a place for quitters. It's not a place for quitters. Listen to what else it says. Revelation 21:7 says, "He who overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son." Listen, heaven is a prepared place for a prepared people. Heaven is a prepared place for a prepared people. I was a wild and crazy kid when I was a little kid. You can only imagine. My mom used to have to take like a strap and strap me to a chair when at dinner time because I'd be up running around the table screaming and yelling. I wouldn't even sit down to eat my food. She literally had to strap me there. Look, she's smiling right there. She knows it's true. Literally had to strap me down to get me to quit going crazy. And I remember all sorts of fun, cool things that we did. But one of the coolest things we ever did when I was a little kid was go to Worlds of Fun for the first time. I remember driving up on there down the highway and seeing these huge roller coasters and just like, like little kids do, just screaming in the car. I was so excited. I just started randomly screaming, like, "Ah!" When I saw them, I thought, "Oh, this is so cool. I can't wait." I started going crazy. So we get there. We get to Worlds of Fun. And as we pull in there, I'm like trying to decide what ride I want to ride first. And I'm just like about to pass out. I'm turning in circles. I'm so excited. Finally get to this one ride. It's called the Timberwolf, wooden roller coaster. Run over there to it. I get over there to it. I get in line for it. And I'm waiting. I'm just excited. I can't wait. I'm like freaking out in the line. I just can't stand still. And I finally get to the front. I want to ride in the front. So it's real crazy and real scary and really everything. I get down to the front. And this guy comes walking up. And this guy comes up there right before I get in the front, comes up to me, and sets this pole by me. And he looks at me. And he says, "Son, you're too short to ride this ride." And I was like, "You got to be kidding me. How can I be too short?" So I looked at him and I said, "Sir," started crying. I was a little kid. I said, "I just want to ride the ride. Can I ride the ride, please? Please let me ride the ride." And he looked at me and he smiled. "Okay, fine. Go ahead. Get on." So I got on the front, rode down the roller coaster, and it was a blast. One of the coolest memories that I have. And you know what? Some of you think eternity is going to be like that for you. Some of you think that heaven's going to be like that for you, or for your friends, or for your family. You think that you're going to get up there, and God's going to come up to you, and one of his angels will be standing there in line, and you'll get to the big golden gates, and before you can go through the golden gates, there's going to be a spiritual stick, and he's going to set it up next to you and say, "Well, judging by this spiritual stick, you weren't spiritual enough to get into heaven." And you think you're going to have the chance to look and say, "God, please, just let me through the golden gates. I just want to go into heaven." And some of you actually think God's going to say, "Well, okay, you're free. Come on through." You're crazy. You're crazy. Heaven is a prepared place for a prepared people. God's people. Christians. People who've accepted Jesus Christ as Savior. And if you think there's any other way to heaven than that, you're in the wrong place. Because that's not it. That's not it. You're thinking the wrong things. Listen. This is so much more than anything you could ever imagine. This heaven talk that we've just had. It's so much more than you could ever believe. If you've been paying attention, you've been hearing about something you could never realize the importance of. And this is why. What we're going to talk about next, and we're going to talk about it real quick. 3 things. The reality of hell. The reality of hell, and here it is, starting off number 1. Hell is a real place. Listen up, hell is a real place.